Welcome to the Life Self-Mastery Podcast, where we bring in entrepreneurs who have created online businesses and improved their lifestyles. Here's your host, Rohit Malhotra.
Hi everyone, today I'm excited to have Davis Jones, who's a co-founder of Eazl, which is a venture-backed professional development community headquartered in San Francisco. Jones earned his MBA with a degree in global finance from EDHEC Business School in France, which ranked as one of the top 50 MBA schools in the world. And he done his bachelor's degree from Sonoma State University in California. Welcome to the show, Davis.
Hi, thanks for having me, Rohit. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for listening, whoever's listening.
Awesome. So, how did you get your start in entrepreneurship, and what made you start Eazl?
Well, entrepreneurship generally and Eazl are a little bit different. I started as my first business when I was 14 years old. And I don't know why I've loved entrepreneurship, but I mean, it really is my passion. Everything that I've done in terms of my education, my focus, why I've taken jobs, where I've gone, ever since I was a very young person, has always been about learning how to build a business that means something to people.
Correct. How did you get the start with Eazl?
Well, I got the start with Eazl. I guess the story really kind of begins when I finished my MBA program. Even though I really liked that I did choose to go and get an MBA, quite frankly, the career services were totally inadequate, both at the MBA level and at the undergraduate level. And so when I went onto the job market, I found that basically I didn't know anything about getting a job. I didn't know anything about how to build a career that was valuable financially, valuable personally. And, I have to say I was a little bit angry because, I spent quite a lot of money on my MBA and on my undergraduate degree. And so my first job was actually as a recruiter because basically I had finally said, what is wrong with my job search? And then my friend gave me this resume template, and I modified it a little bit, and then I created a resume, and then I sent it around to a few people where I was living, and then they sent it to some recruiters. The recruiters contacted me and said, why don't you join us as a recruiter? So basically my first, corporate job after having an MBA was recruitment. And so I went from knowing nothing about job hunting to knowing a lot about it very fast. And my brother was graduating from Stanford around that time. And he said, none of my friends know about getting a job either, and they're all pretty scared. We should create an online course about this stuff. And so we did. And it became the best-selling online course on job hunting in the history of the internet. And then we built a business around that.
Interesting. So did you get your start with building courses on Udemy and Skillshare, or were you selling courses on your own website?
Honestly, it was an intern who changed the course of Eazl forever. So we were just building the course regardless of where it was going to be distributed. We were just like, we think that we can make really cool videos about this stuff, and maybe we can sell it to colleges. Maybe we'll put it on YouTube. We don't really know. And my brother was really interested in animation, so we decided to make the courses really colorful and animated and fun. And I used to be in the music business, so I like things that are very entertaining. And then we had an intern, this guy, Neil Hopkins, who was one of the best interns we ever had. And I said, Neil, I want you to go look on the internet and figure out if there's any place that we can sell a course. And he said, I found this website called Udemy, and it looks like people are selling courses there. So I think we should put it there. And then so we put it there. We eventually put it on Skillshare. And in both those places, the course became very, very successful. And we thought, wow, we're making a little business here. So it was really an intern who found that, about this whole online course world, and that you could make money from it and stuff like that.
Got it. And are you still, putting up courses on Udemy, or do you put courses exclusively on Eazl?
Oh yeah, we put courses on Udemy. We put courses on CNN course website, on TechCrunch and Mashable and Skillshare. So we have our courses in lots of different places. And yeah, we're still creating courses. Like, we've been contacted by some content providers to create courses for businesses. So now companies like PayPal and Lyft and organizations like the World Bank, they use our content. So yeah, we create lots of courses and put them in lots of places.
Got it. And I'm actually one of your students. Part of growth hacking course.
Well, thank you for learning with Eazl. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and what I realized is that you invested a lot into video production. So how can I improve my video quality? I got a few videos on YouTube. So what would be your take on improving a video quality so that my YouTube channel could attract more viewers?
Yeah, I think that you're asking the wrong question from my perspective. There's a really famous quote from Jack Welch that I always remember, which is that if you don't have a competitive advantage, then don't compete. If you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. And, here we are doing a podcast. So podcasts are great and people love podcasts. And so, the podcast is an audio medium, right? You don't need to do video production to have a podcast. And if you really do want to, now let's talk about YouTube and video production generally. So like if you want to compete with video production in terms of really high video production value, you got to think about the other people who are in the competitive arena, right? And very quickly you're talking about like Pixar and movie studios and professional animators. And if you think about that, it's going to be very difficult to compete against those people without a lot of resources. So YouTube so broadly speaking, it takes a very serious commitment to decide to compete in the video world. And Eazl has made that commitment, but as you notice, Eazl doesn't have podcasts, because to me, the only podcast that I would release would be something that was the quality of something like one of my favorite podcasts, Radio Lab. And I don't know if you've heard Radio Lab, but their audio engineering is absolutely fabulous. And so when I listen to Radio Lab, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. And so that gets back to that Jack Welch quote: if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. However, YouTube is a little bit of a different ecosystem from what I've noticed. I don't really think you need to have movie level quality to be successful on YouTube. I think that YouTube is a little bit more about what's trending. It's a little bit more about lots of content. It's about doing kind of crazy things. So that particular ecosystem is not, in my perspective, about video production quality necessarily. It's more about some of these other things that determine whether or not your videos get a lot of views and if you get a lot of subscribers and stuff like that.
Got it. And who would be the ideal target audience for Eazl?
It's hard. That's one thing, especially as somebody who teaches growth hacking, that we've always struggled with at Eazl, because we don't really have a persona that is really specific. We have learned about the people who tend to succeed within the Eazl community, but it's not somebody. I can't say it's people from the ages of 25 to 32 who tend to have this income range and think like this. It's just not that simple. Our customers and the students that tend to do really well tend to be people who are humble, people who are interested in providing value to other people. Oftentimes they're people that believe that that basically learning is a lifelong journey, not just something that you go to school for, get your certificate and then leave. I guess they tend to be visual learners. A lot of our students love the fact that we really invest in video so that you can learn a little bit easier versus something that's maybe a little bit more boring. So those are some elements that create that our student base tends to share. But I can't tell you that there's one specific kind of person that takes Eazl courses. We have over 150,000 students now all over the world, so there's just a huge range of people that take Eazl's courses.
Got it. And on the Eazl platform, I saw that you offer courses as low as $9 or $10. What would be what would you advise course creators when they want to price their courses? I could see some growth hacking courses priced as high as $1,000. So how, is there any advice on if somebody releases 70 hours of content, they should price it at an X range? What would be your take on that?
Eazl places purpose over profit. So I will lead with that. I mean, I do believe that particularly courses like our growth hacking course and our resume writing course, or we call it the career hacking course, they provide way more value than $10. I mean, for example, in the career management course, just by enrolling in the course, you're getting a sample bank of 50 professionally written resumes, tons of guys. I mean, all that stuff is probably worth in the range of at least $300 to $400. Having said that, I think that it's a totally different business model to ask somebody to pay $1,000 for information. And I think in terms of it implies a lot for your marketing, it implies a lot for customer service. I think somebody who's paying $1,000 for an online course is going to expect a lot more in terms of customer service and things like that. So I'm not saying it's impossible, and I have thought about it in the past. But from a business standpoint, I think it means it's really different if somebody's paying a really high price point. And then from it implies something about your audience. If you are going to have people paying $1,000 for a course, then I don't know, you can expect to have maybe 2,000 people in your community. And, I don't know how you're going to use that community or how you're going to work with them, but that's very different than having a very low price point like Eazl has, and then having 150,000 people in your community. So to us, we've decided that our purpose is to make higher education accessible to all. And so we want to have the lowest price point possible while maintaining a minimum profit margin that we know about internally, and it's competitive with the education industry. But our goal is to lower costs as low as we can go while maintaining that profit margin, because we believe in the accessibility of information. So we've made that choice out of our philosophy, and I guess you could call it a strategy, but it's certainly not a revenue maximizing strategy. So that's how we made that choice.
Got it. And kind of about growth hacking, there are a lot of moving parts, but a lot of listeners on the podcast are small business owners. So what advice would you give to people who want to acquire, engage, and retain these users? Get maybe the first 1,000 users and keep them engaged with the business.
Make human connections. Make real connections with people and provide real value to people. Look for people that actually care about what you're doing and that you care about what they're doing. Because this is a very different approach, but I do think that it's particularly appropriate for small business owners. I mean, if you're PayPal, then you don't need to know all your users, right? But there's it's kind of an older idea, but pretty famous in the startup community, which is, and I think a guy wrote a book about it. It's called 1,000 True Fans. 1,000 True Fans. And so the idea is that if you have 1,000 people that genuinely care about what you're doing and they depend on it, they would really miss it from their lives if it went away, then you have a business. You have something that you can build from. And so especially in that first 1,000 users, you got to be able to treat them like kings and queens, but you also got to be ready to tell the people who are bad that they need to get lost. But when you find somebody really cool who cares about what you're doing, go deep with that relationship and find a way to make it meaningful. In terms of growth hacking, though, as a practice, I would say that, growth hacking is kind of a sexy word, and a lot of people think that it means that you're going to go and have some shortcut that enables you to go from a business that has no customers to being Airbnb in 3 months, and that is just not the case. And I think that it's a shame that people associate growth hacking with kind of these tricks on these marketing tricks, because those tricks go away as fast as they were created. As soon as somebody starts doing something that gets 1,000 email signups and they write a blog post about it, a month later, everybody's doing it, and it doesn't feel fresh. So what the value of growth hacking really is the practice of growth hacking. Growth hacking is like yoga or basketball or running or stretching or anything else that you build over time. It's a practice of, when you have an idea, how can I experiment to test that hypothesis? How can I frame it as an experiment that I can measure? How can I make that measurement for a low cost, deployed in a very short amount of time? How can I build on my successes? How am I tracking what I'm doing? How am I working with my team to make all this happen faster? That's the value of growth hacking, not the tips and tricks from my perspective.
Got it. And are there any companies which you think are doing growth hacking the right way?
Well, it probably would be difficult to know about it. I think that certainly in Silicon Valley, there are companies that are practicing growth hacking at a high level. They're having teams of growth hackers that are working together, and I'm sure that they're very effective. But oftentimes you don't know it, because to the consumer you just see that the company's growing and that maybe you received an ad that seemed to make sense to you, and so you clicked on something. So it's difficult to know which companies are really executing growth hacking well. I will say that I've been impressed with the way that Airbnb has been pretty aggressive about taking market share, but they've also retained their focus on their human purpose, on staying connected with people, on controlling their narrative of their business and society. And I think that all that stuff is really important. And I'm sure that on the inside, there's a lot of data behind all that stuff. And also Airbnb is building virality into their product. And I think that's very important, because the original growth hacking is about, how does the use of your product create growth itself? How do you not have to pay to acquire new users? And so I think Airbnb does a pretty good job of that. And they're the company that comes to mind right away.
Got it. And coming back to Eazl, how much money have you raised till now?
I think probably in total we've raised around $50,000.
Oh, okay. Got it. And there's a digital degree program that you're running where you're inviting others to invest into Eazl. So are you asking non-accredited investors also to invest into your startup?
Yes, we are, and this is part of our drive to have real human relationships with people that matter. I have an economics training background, and I believe that good relationships in the business world, particularly, are based on good economics. That is, that the person if somebody is going to contribute something to Eazl, they should be getting something of economic value out of it. So I'm not looking for somebody to donate to Eazl, but I do want people to invest in Eazl and receive money from Eazl. And I believe that that's a long-term sustainable relationship that has long-term value. So what you're describing, Rohit, is that we are using new securities laws in the United States to allow anybody to invest in Eazl. And so far, about 60% of our investors have been students. And to me, that's fantastic. We are thinking about moving towards decentralizing our shareholder structure to students as much as possible, because we think that having a student-owned institution of higher education that lives on the internet and has a global focus is pretty interesting, and that it will be long-term, perhaps very, very successful. But the digital degree that you described is more about making higher education accessible to everybody. Being from India, I know that I'm sure you can think of people who want to go to college, but for whatever reason, they have to have a job, or they have a child, or college is just too expensive for them. They don't have access to higher education. And India is, a middle income country. Imagine the situation in some of the really developing economies that are happening in Africa, in some parts of Asia. And we know that population growth is just going through the roof in Africa. Probably in our lifetimes, Africa is going to have as many people as Asia. And these people need higher education. And we believe that the digital degree can serve some of these people in this way.
Makes sense. Now, regarding courses, what I've realized is I do know a lot of courses, but I don't complete it. So do you face the same sort of problems for your students, and how do you plan to resolve such issues whereby people do not complete the courses?
Well, I guess people tend to complete Eazl courses a lot more than our competitors. So our data suggests that Eazl courses are about 70% more engaging than our peers. And we get that because of data we get from Udemy. Basically, people watch our courses for 70% longer than our peers in general. And that's, I think, a lot has to do with our video production, investments in that area. And what we're doing more and more is we're trying to have alternative routes for people to earn actual credentials that mean things in the workplace. So that's why, if somebody goes and earns Eazl's Facebook ads certificate, they can hopefully use that to help them get clients. And again, that's economic meaning in what we're doing here.
Interesting. And how big is your team? And if you want to talk about the revenue numbers, which Eazl does.
Sure. Yeah, we have 4 people on the team. We've hired 2 people recently, 1 person for student support and 1 person for product. And Eazl's revenue is growing organically at about 50%. It's more like 55% every year. So I expect that in 2018, we might get to, maybe $300,000 in revenue, depending on some of the things that we do. And so, Eazl's not a huge business yet. And that's cool. We're a sustainable business. We don't rely on external funding to survive. We have an already thriving business, and we think that by putting purpose over profit, that we're going to continue to be meaningful to students, which means that we have a real business.
Awesome. So let's quickly do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
Well, okay. So I think I'll mention a few things. I really enjoyed reading a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it's a book by Mark Andreessen's former partner, which describes their experience growing a company. It talks about Netscape, and then I forgot the name of their second company, but it really just describes, I think it really describes why startups are not easy, and that you shouldn't expect them to be easy. And that was really helpful for me. I also really liked a book called Good Profit by Charles Koch. Charles Koch owns the second biggest private company in the world, which is Koch Industries. And even though he's a relatively controversial figure in the United States, he's a brilliant economic mind. And he talks a lot about, looking at your business from an economic standpoint versus a lot of times we tend to think that, oh, my problem is that I don't have the right strategy, or I don't have a pretty enough logo or something. And I think that in general, that's not your problem. In general, your problem is that the economic relationship is not set up correctly. So I really liked the book for that purpose. But probably the most fundamental thing related to business for me was not a business book at all. It was related to my spirituality, and it's not religious per se. But there's a mythologist in the United States called Joseph Campbell, and he wrote a bunch of books on mythology where he would look at the patterns of similar myths across cultures. So, there's a myth from India that I remember he talks about that I love, and some from Native Americans in the United States and all over the world, from Africa and from Christian traditions and Buddhist traditions. It was called The Power of Myth, and it really turned me into somebody who appreciated the value of being focused on other human beings and embracing your inner spirituality and making that meaningful in the world. And that's not to say to push your values on other people, but that was really influential on me, and it made me feel like business was more than a way to make money. It's a way to be purposeful in the world.
Yeah, interesting. If you could go back in time when you started working on Eazl, what is the one thing you would have focused on?
I think if I was to restart Eazl, what would I have focused on?
That's right.
Yeah, anything that I would have done dramatically differently. We had to learn everything we did. I guess I probably would have avoided the topic of entrepreneurship, maybe, in terms of creating online courses. For some reason, the topic of entrepreneurship is it's very difficult to get people to take those courses. I don't know exactly what it is, but maybe would have skipped creating a course on entrepreneurship. But other than that, everything that we've done has been a great learning experience. And so it's very difficult to say something that I would have changed, because everything that we did that failed enabled us to learn and get stronger.
Got it. And what's your favorite online tools, example, Gmail, Slack, or Lead Pages?
I'm pretty much a Google Sheets nerd. I love Google Sheets.
Got it. And what is the best way people can reach out to you?
Yeah, I love LinkedIn. So I invite LinkedIn connections. Please connect with me. And if you have any partnership requests, I'm learning how to receive all these partnership requests that people are bringing to us, and we want to listen to you. We want to honor your energy that you are bringing to it. If you think there's a way that you can help Eazl, be meaningful to other people and with your input. So connect with me on LinkedIn and let's talk.
Awesome, Davis. Thanks a lot for coming on to the show, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Rohit. Thanks for staying up late with me to record the interview.
Thanks for listening to the Life Self-Mastery podcast, where we teach you how to start and grow your online business. For more information, visit Rohit's blog at www.lifeselfmastery.com.